As the Aukus announcement approaches, a congressman recommends deploying a jointly operated U.S. submarine to Australia. As a temporary solution under the Aukus agreement, a top member of the U.S. Congress has proposed for an American submarine with 2 crews to be stationed in Australia. Republican Rob Whitman also stated that in order to educate Australian sailors and shipbuilders for the eventual acquisition of a fleet of nuclear-powered submarines, they should be deployed to the US for months at a time. Mr. Whitman was one of a bipartisan group of U.S. House of Representatives members who wrote a letter to President Joe Biden endorsing the Aukus agreement. It was brought on by communication from 2 powerful senators that was leaked, in which they expressed concern that supplying Australia with nuclear-powered submarines may reach the breaking point for the U.S. submarine industry. The idea of a direct sale of U.S. submarines was probably an oversimplification, according to Representative Whitman, who served as the most senior Republican on the Sea Power and Projection Forces Subcommittee during the previous Congress. He asserted, however, that in order to fill the projected capability gap created by the retirement of the current Collins-class fleet and the construction of the new submarines, a nuclear-powered boat could be dispatched to Australia's area of responsibility. He told 7.30, "I think it would be dual-crewed. I also believe that the command of the submarine would be a dual command, with a commanding officer and an executive officer operating it together. And I think this is where we transition to Australia being able to run its own submarine." Dual crewing a U.S. submarine would probably bring up other concerns, according to Joe Courtney, a Democrat and another member of Congress who signed the letter to the president. "It seems to me as kind of begging a lot of problems and creating a whole sort of host of other sovereign control questions," he said, having people from various navies operating submarines on a regular basis. Having said that, full speed should be used for the joint training. It would raise concerns about Australian sovereignty. Australian Strategic Policy Institute, ASPI, Director in Washington, Mark Watson, concurred. Who has the last say over the employment of a specific vessel for a specific task if there are crews from the US and Australia on board during a crisis? Said he. For instance, I believe you will see Australians doing training on US submarines. It will be interesting to see whether we get directly to the stage where there is a joint and integrated Australian and US crew on a US submarine. Supporters of Aukus assert that US shipyard capacity can be increased. Mr. Whitman recommended that Australian shipbuilders go to the US to assist in building one of the submarines, while Australian sailors should complete a full deployment on a Virginia-class submarine. So, he continued, to be here from the time they start cutting the first piece of steel till that boat is put in the sea. Because only such experience will enable Australian shipbuilders to completely comprehend the scale of their work and the construction and assembly process for these boats. As the Navy strives to catch up on its goal of boosting its nuclear-powered attack fleet from 50 boats to at least 66 boats, US shipyards are under pressure. Senators Jack Reed and James Inhofe warned in a letter to Joe Biden that what had been hailed as a do-no-harm chance would really turn into a zero-sum competition for limited resources. Reps. Whitman and Courtney, who both represent districts with strong links to the shipbuilding industry, asserted that capacity could be enhanced. You know, honestly, if Aukus genuinely functions as it should, the UK and Australia should be contributing to this program, Mr. Courtney remarked. And I believe that demonstrates that it is a force multiplier that can effectively meet the higher demand. Analyst, US debate creates political risk. The Australian government will shortly provide specifics of which nuclear-powered submarines it intends to acquire and when, over 18 months after Aukus was first revealed. The agreement was always going to be complicated, according to Charles Adell, the Australia chair at the Centre for Strategic and International Studies. This is frequently accomplished in diplomacy by first determining the terms of the agreement before making an announcement. You put forth a lot of effort earlier, added he. No, that is not how it happened. After making the announcement, we added, oh, and now we have to figure out how we're going to do it. That is the reason the initial statement read, "We're going to keep quiet for the next 18 months while we figure out how we're going to achieve this, on what timeline, with which companies, in which countries, and on what kind of delivery timetable." Aukus is still on schedule, according to Defense Minister Richard Marles, and a statement is expected by the end of March. A layer of political risk that may not have been anticipated has emerged, according to Mark Watson of OSPI, as a result of the recent debate in the US. Aukus and the submarines program continue to enjoy very strong bipartisan support, he stated. The issue will arise if that develops into a Aukus, yes, but perhaps not at this time, as we have our own concerns with our own submarine fleet. A congressman claims that China is using criticism of the Aukus to bully Australia. Aukus has come under fire from Beijing on numerous occasions, with the three members being accused of having China as their aim and Australia's pursuit of nuclear-powered submarines being criticized as a waste of money. However, proponents of the deal in Washington contend that it is essential for Indo-Pacific security. The top member of the House Armed Services Committee, Adam Smith, who also signed the letter to President Biden, stated that they, China, don't have a right to tell Australia what they can and cannot do. China would undoubtedly like to have more power to intimidate Australia. However, I wholeheartedly commend the Australian government and people for saying, "Nah, we're not going for that. We're going to form the collaborations that we want to."